The world fell silent the day my son died. It wasn't the kind of silence that brings peace, but the kind that crushes your chest and leaves you gasping for air. The hospital corridors echoed with the faint hum of machines and the hurried footsteps of nurses, but all of it blurred into nothingness for me. My boy, my only child, the one I had carried in my arms as a baby, the one whose laughter once filled our small home, was gone. I remember holding his hand one last time. His fingers, once so warm and strong, had grown cold and lifeless. My tears fell freely, soaking the sheet that covered him. They tell you that time heals, but in that moment, I knew no amount of time could ever mend a heart broken in such a brutal way. Beside me stood my daughter-in-law Amina. She cried too, but I couldn't help noticing how her sobs sounded rehearsed, how her eyes darted not at my son's still face, but at the nurses and relatives who had gathered around. She was careful to be seen, to be pitied. I told myself I was being unfair, that grief takes different forms. Still, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something in her sorrow was hollow. When the funeral was over and the relatives returned to their lives, I was left in an empty house, drowning in memories. Every corner carried my son's presence. The chair where he used to drink his tea, the walls that echoed his late-night conversations with me, the bed where he would fall asleep exhausted after a long day of work. The first week was unbearable. People came and went, bringing food and hollow condolences. Amina, dressed in black, sat in the living room like a tragic heroine from a play. Neighbors patted her hand, relatives praised her strength, and she nodded quietly, milking every ounce of sympathy she could. But when the doors closed and we were alone, her mask slipped. She would sigh loudly, complain about how hard everything was going to be now that my son was gone. She didn't ask how I was coping, didn't sit with me in my grief. Instead, she wanted to know if my son had left any money. "Mother," she whispered one night, her voice sharp even in its softness, "surely he must have left something behind. A savings account, some property. You know how difficult it will be for me now." Her words stung like salt on a wound. My son's body was barely in the ground, and already she was asking about wealth. I said nothing, just shook my head and pretended not to know. A few days later, I forced myself to go through his belongings. His clothes smelled of him still, and I buried my face in them, weeping until my throat ached. In a small box at the bottom of his wardrobe, I found the envelope. Inside were neatly arranged documents: his will, his bank details, and property papers. My heart pounded as I read the words. He had left me everything: the house we lived in, 2 cars, both under his name, and a sum of money that was more than I ever dreamed he had saved. Tears blurred my vision, but these tears were different. My son had thought of me. He had trusted me with what he had built. In his absence, this was his way of wrapping me in his protection. I sat there for hours, clutching the papers to my chest. But soon, the thought of Amina crept into my mind. If she discovered this, what would she do? Would she squander everything? Would she fight me for it, pretending she had a right to what he had intentionally left for me? My hands trembled as I put the documents back in their envelope. I made a decision that night. I wouldn't tell her. It wasn't greed that drove me. It was instinct, a mother's instinct to protect what her son had entrusted to her. Amina had never shown kindness, never offered love without expecting something in return. She had hurt my son in ways that only I knew. And though he never stopped loving her, I had seen the pain in his eyes during their fights. I remembered the last argument I overheard between them, just weeks before his death. He had come home late, exhausted, only to be met with her sharp voice. "You're never home!" "You think money is everything, but I'm stuck here waiting like some maid. Maybe I should have married someone else, someone who actually cared about me." I had seen him slump in his chair afterward, rubbing his temples, silent tears threatening to fall. That was the night I realized he carried burdens heavier than I ever imagined. And now, here she was, a widow draped in black, pretending to be broken, but in reality, hungry for what she believed was hers. No, I couldn't let her take from him what he wanted me to have. The next morning, she asked again, "Mother, did you find anything? He must have left us something." I forced a weak smile. "Nothing, my dear. Just bills and old receipts." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering for a moment, but she said nothing. Instead, she sighed dramatically and left the room. I knew then that this was only the beginning. In the silence of my room, I pressed the envelope to my heart and whispered a promise to my son. They won't take this from me, my love. I'll guard what you left with the same love I raised you with. I swear it. And so, the secret was born. One that would grow heavier with each passing day. One that would eventually ignite the flames of betrayal, confrontation, and, finally, my revenge. The days after the funeral blurred together into a haze of whispered condolences and pitiful glances. People came by, offering food I could barely eat, their words bouncing off the hollow shell I had become. Through it all, Amina played her part perfectly. She sat in the living room with her hair covered, her eyes red, her lips trembling. Neighbors would come in, hold her hands, and whisper, "You poor girl, you've lost your whole world." She would nod silently, squeezing their palms, and a single tear would roll down her cheek. They left with admiration in their eyes, speaking of her strength, her courage, her devotion. But when the door closed, the tear-streaked face would vanish. One afternoon, only 3 days after the burial, I overheard her on the phone in her bedroom. Her voice was low but sharp, edged with irritation. "Of course I'll manage," she hissed. "But it's not fair. He should have left me something. I don't know what his mother is hiding, but I'll find out. I'm not going to live like some beggar after everything I put up with." I stood frozen in the hallway, the words stabbing me deeper than any knife could. So that was it. The sympathy, the widow's act, it was all for show. She began her campaign slowly. Every morning, she would approach me with her softest voice, offering to make me tea, asking if I'd eaten, sitting beside me like a dutiful daughter. But always her question circled back to the same point. "Mother, are you sure there wasn't a policy? A bank account? A land title? You know how much he loved me. He would never leave me with nothing." The guilt gnawed at me, but I stood firm. I shook my head, gave vague answers, and turned away. Inside, I whispered apologies to my son. "Forgive me, my child. Forgive me for this silence." The neighbors began to notice Amina's loneliness, or what she allowed them to think was loneliness. She invited them in, accepted their sympathy, let them see her fragile state. Soon, the whispers began. "She has nothing left. How cruel for her mother-in-law to keep everything. She must be suffering so much." It was as though she had orchestrated the narrative, painting me as a cold, unfeeling woman while she played the role of the broken widow. I stayed silent, but the anger inside me grew. Each lie she told was like a stone on my chest. One evening, she sat across from me, her face painted with an expression of forced sorrow. "Mother," she began, "I've been thinking maybe I should sell some of his things. His clothes, his watch, maybe even his car. I can't bear to see them every day. They hurt too much." I stiffened. The car she spoke of, the black sedan, was one of the 2 vehicles my son had left under his name. And it was mine now, according to his will. She didn't know that. She thought it belonged to her. I looked into her eyes and saw not grief, but calculation. "You can't sell them," I said firmly. "They are still his. Let them be." Her lips tightened, her eyes flashing with irritation, before she quickly masked it with a sigh. "Of course. If that's what you want," she replied, lowering her gaze like a submissive widow. But I knew the thought had lodged in her mind like a thorn. At night, I lay awake in my bed, the envelope hidden safely beneath the floorboard. Guilt washed over me like waves. My son had loved her once. He had chosen her as his wife, his companion. Should I not honor that by sharing what he left? But then I remembered the bitterness in his eyes, the arguments, the way she belittled him for not giving her enough, for not being the man she thought she deserved. I remembered the coldness in her voice as she spoke on the phone about what she was owed. No, she did not deserve his last gift. Weeks passed, and Amina's mask began to slip more often. She grew bolder in her questions, more insistent. One afternoon, as I sat with a relative who had come to visit, she burst into the room with her voice sharp. "Mother, you need to tell me the truth. Did he leave anything? Anything at all? You think I don't notice you hiding things?" The relative shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. My face burned, but I kept my composure. "He left nothing," I said calmly, though my hands shook beneath my shawl. Amina's eyes narrowed, her jaw clenched, and for a moment, the mask cracked. I saw her greed bare and raw, but just as quickly, she forced a sob, turned to the relative and wailed, "See how she treats me. As if I am nothing, as if I wasn't his wife." The relative patted her shoulder, glaring at me with silent judgment. I swallowed my words, burying my fury deep inside. That night, when we were alone, she came to me again, her voice low and venomous. "You think you can fool me? I know he left something. And if you don't tell me, I'll find out myself." Her threat hung in the air like smoke. I looked at her then, really looked at her. Not as my son's widow, but as the woman who had tormented him in life and now sought to strip him of dignity in death. And in that moment, I felt something inside me shift. The guilt that had been eating me alive began to dissolve, replaced by a cold determination. If it was war she wanted, I would give it to her. She thought she could wear her mask of sympathy forever, but masks have a way of slipping. And when hers fell completely, the world would see her for what she truly was, and I would be ready. The storm broke on a Thursday afternoon. For weeks, Amina had been circling like a vulture, her questions sharper, her stares colder, her patience thinning. I could feel her suspicion growing, as though she could smell the papers hidden under my floorboard. I had been careful, never letting the envelope leave my room, but I knew it was only a matter of time before she made her move. That day, I returned from the market with a small bag of groceries. As I entered the house, something felt off. The air was too still. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. My heart dropped into my stomach. I rushed inside. The floorboard was open. The envelope was gone, and there she was, sitting on the bed. The documents spread across her lap like stolen treasure. Her face was flushed, her hands trembling not with grief, but with greed. She looked up at me, her eyes blazing with triumph. "So it's true," she hissed. "All this time, you lied to me. He left you everything, everything. The house, the cars, the money. Do you think that's fair? Do you think you deserve it more than me, his wife?" I froze at the doorway, my chest tightening. The sight of her holding my son's last gift to me was unbearable. "Put them back," I said, my voice trembling but firm. She laughed bitterly. "Put them back? These belong to me as much as they belong to you. Do you think the neighbors are blind? Do you think the relatives don't see how you've kept me in misery while hoarding all this wealth? You're nothing but a selfish old woman." Her words cut deep, but anger burned hotter than pain inside me. "Selfish?" I spat, stepping into the room. "You dare call me selfish after everything you did to him? After the way you treated him, broke his spirit, drained his soul with your endless demands? Do you think I didn't see? Do you think a mother's eyes are blind?" She faltered, her lips tightening. But her pride wouldn't let her stop. "You're just jealous," she snapped. "Jealous because he loved me, because he chose me over you. And now, you want to erase me from his life by keeping what he left behind. But I won't let you. I'll go to the court. I'll tell everyone what you've done. You'll see. I'll get what's mine." My hands shook, but my voice rose, stronger than I thought it could. "What's yours? What's yours?" I shouted. "Did you sit by his side when he worked late into the night, just to keep this house standing? Did you wipe his brow when he came home exhausted? Did you hold him when his dreams fell apart? No, you nagged, you cursed, you demanded more, more. And now you stand there, hands clutching his last gift to me, claiming it as your right, my son, my blood. Chose me to carry what he built. Not you. Me, because deep down, he knew who truly loved him." My voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, silence filled the room. My tears blurred my sight, but I stood tall, refusing to let her see my weakness. Her mask finally shattered. The soft widow, the grieving wife, the fragile soul, all gone. What remained was a woman sharp and cruel, her face twisted with greed. "Fine," she said coldly. "If you want war, you'll have it. I'll drag you to court. I'll tell the relatives. I'll shame you in front of everyone. Let's see how long you can hold on to your precious secret." She shoved the papers into the envelope and flung it onto the bed. Then, with a final glare, she stormed out of the room. I collapsed onto the mattress, clutching the envelope to my chest, my sobs shaking the walls. The betrayal wasn't new. I had always known her heart, but seeing it bare, seeing it unmasked, broke something in me. But alongside the pain, something else sparked within me. A fire. If she wanted war, she would get it. But it wouldn't be the kind she expected. I would not scream in the streets. I would not beg the courts. I would not play her game. No, my revenge would be quieter, smarter, sweeter. I would show her that greed can consume, but love, true love, outlives it. And when I was finished, she would have nothing. The house grew heavier after that fight. Amina barely spoke to me anymore. She moved through the halls with sharp footsteps, her head held high, as though she already owned everything under this roof. She began whispering to relatives, spreading poison into their ears. Soon, the phone calls came, sharp voices demanding why I was being cruel, why I was hoarding my son's wealth instead of supporting his poor widow. It stung, but I stayed silent. I knew the truth would reveal itself in time. Then, the letters arrived. Amina had gone to a lawyer. She filed a petition, claiming her rights to her husband's property. She strutted through the house, waving the stamped papers like a flag of victory. "You see, mother. You can't hide forever. The law will make you give me what I deserve." But what she didn't know, what she could never know, was that my son had been clear in his will. Every line was watertight, every word chosen with care. He had written it with his own hands, signed it with his own name, sealed it with witnesses. When the hearing came, I walked into that cold room with trembling legs but a steady heart. Amina arrived dressed in somber black, her face painted with grief, her lawyer at her side. She looked at me and smirked, certain of her victory. But as the judge read my son's will aloud, the smirk faded. "To my beloved mother, who raised me with sacrifice and love, I leave my home, my vehicles, and my savings, for I know she will guard them with care and honor my memory." The silence that followed was deafening. Amina's eyes widened, her lips parted in disbelief. "That's not fair," she cried, her voice breaking. "I was his wife! He was supposed to provide for me." The judge's gavel struck. "The will is valid. His wishes are clear. Case dismissed." Her scream echoed in the chamber, raw and ugly, but it did nothing. Her lies had crumbled, her greed exposed for all to see. She came home that evening with fire in her eyes, but the relatives who had once pitied her now kept their distance. Neighbors whispered, not of her sorrow, but of her shamelessness. Her mask was gone, her reputation in ashes. And me, I remained quiet, watching her unravel. But revenge, I realized, was not in her humiliation alone. True revenge would be to honor my son in a way she never could. Weeks later, I went to the bank and opened a trust in my son's name. With part of his savings, I set up scholarships for children who had lost their parents. Children like me now, children like my future grandchildren would never be. His name would live on in their education, in their future. The cars I donated to a local charity that transported sick children to hospitals. His wheels would carry hope, not greed. The house, I kept, not because of its value, but because its walls held his laughter, his memories. I planted a small garden in the backyard, filled with his favorite flowers. Every morning, I sat there, breathing in the scent of jasmine and roses, feeling him close. One night, Amina came to me, her face pale and weary. The fight had drained her. The gossip had destroyed her standing. She looked nothing like the proud widow who once demanded the world. "You've ruined me," she whispered. I met her eyes calmly. "No, my dear, you ruined yourself. Greed did that, lies did that. My son left you nothing because he saw your heart long before I did. And now, you have exactly what you earned, nothing." She turned and left, her footsteps fading into silence. Soon after, she packed her bags and moved away. I never saw her again, and so, peace returned. Not the peace of forgetting, for how could I ever forget my boy? But the peace of knowing his legacy was safe, his memory untarnished. In the quiet of the nights, I still wept. I still longed for his voice, his presence. But when I sat in the garden, surrounded by the blooms I had planted for him, I felt his spirit smile. I whispered to the stars, "I did it, my son. I kept your trust. I guarded your gift. She has nothing, but you live on." And in that moment, I understood revenge wasn't about destroying her. It was about honoring him. And that I had done.